What if everything you've heard about Anne Boleyn's death was designed to make you forget how terrifying it really was? They say it was quick, clean, dignified, but behind the silence was panic, betrayal, and a queen who was never supposed to die then. May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn, the once powerful Queen of England, walks barefoot across Tower Green, no crowds cheering, just a cold morning and a hidden swordsman waiting in silence. History tells us she faced her death with calm grace, but history also lies. Why were the real details buried? Why did King Henry rush her execution by a foreign killer? And why was her body stuffed into a wooden chest with no name? In this video, you'll uncover the truth they didn't want passed down. The twisted trial her. Terrifying final days and the eerie silence that followed. We're digging into the forgotten horror behind Anne Boleyn's execution. The version of the story that was almost erased forever. Stick with us till the end. What you'll hear today doesn't appear in the textbooks. Welcome to History Screen, where the past isn't just told, it's revealed. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a story history tried to bury. She was Queen of England, crowned by the hands of fate, and soon crushed by the hands of power. In the spring of 1536, whispers began circling the court. Anne Boleyn was accused of something no queen had ever been charged with: adultery, incest, and high treason. Not just once, not with one man, but with five. They said she seduced her own brother George Boleyn. They said she lured courtiers, Mark Smeaton, Henry Norris William, Brereton, and Francis Weston into her bed. They said she plotted to kill the king, but here is what they didn't say. There was no real evidence, no letters, no witnesses. No secret love notes. Mark Smeaton, the court musician, was tortured into confessing. George Boleyn was questioned and mocked in court, but gave no plea for mercy. The others were tried and found guilty in a matter of hours, and his trial was scheduled only after all five men had already been condemned and sentenced to death. By then their fates were sealed, and so was hers. But these charges, they didn't come from jealous husbands or moral outrage. They came from the king's right-hand man. Thomas Cromwell was no fool. He knew Anne was dangerous, not because of what she did, but because of what she knew. She had political influence. She stood in the way of an alliance with Spain, and worst of all, she couldn't give Henry the male heir he desperately wanted. Cromwell saw the shift. The king's love had turned cold. Anne had failed to produce a living son. And Jane Seymour, the quiet lady-in-waiting, had already caught the king's ISO. Cromwell acted. He built the case in shadows, fast, brutal. He pulled names from courtmen close to Anne. He created a timeline so sloppy that some of the alleged encounters took place when Anne wasn't even present at court. But no one challenged it. No one dared. Anne was arrested at a May Day joust. One moment she was laughing watching the tournament. The next she was gone, taken to the Tower. Inside the cold stone walls, Anne waited alone, cut off. Her ladies were spies. Her rooms were watched. The only news came from outside, when another man was beheaded. One by one, first Norris, then Weston, then Brereton, then her brother George. The noose tightened, not just around her fate, but around her mind. She began to spiral, praying, pacing, writing to Henry, begging for mercy letters. He never answered. In her moments of silence, she tried to stay strong. But even Anne Boleyn, the proud queen who changed England's religion, could feel the walls closing in, and still no one told her the truth. That her death had already been decided. For 17 long days, Anne Boleyn sat inside the Tower of London, not as a queen, but as a prisoner, stripped of her title, separated from her child, surrounded by stone walls and whispers. At first, she didn't believe it would end this way. How could she? She was the Queen of England, the mother of Elizabeth. The woman Henry had changed the world to marry. But reality crept in quickly. The charges were absurd: adultery, incest, plotting the king's death. And yet her closest allies were already being executed: Mark Smeaton, George Boleyn, Norris, Brereton, Weston. One by one gone. Each death tore a piece of hope away. Inside the Tower, Anne was watched constantly. Even her ladies-in-waiting were handpicked to spy on her. She wasn't allowed privacy, not even in her grief. She laughed at times, then cried, then laughed again. Those who saw her began to whisper, was she losing her mind? But it wasn't madness. It was survival, A human response to the unthinkable. She had been cut off from the world, not knowing if each sunrise would be her last. Psychological torment was silent but cruel. No torture devices, no chains, just time, silence, and fear every morning she expected a pardon. Every night she wondered if the executioner would come before dawn. This cycle of hope rising and crashing broke even the strongest. Yet Anne remained composed, at least on the outside. One eyewitness said, "Never had the queen looked so beautiful as she did that morning. She wore her fear like armor. Her grace carefully performed, her voice calm, her words chosen, but inside she was unraveling. She spoke of death, of the afterlife. She wrote prayers, confessed sins she never committed. She was preparing but not ready. Henry, meanwhile, was celebrating. He had already planned his next wedding. Jane Seymour was being measured for royal robes while Anne waited for the sword. No royal pardon came, no message, no delay. Just silence. Anne's final days were a storm beneath the surface. She smiled, she prayed, but she was alone, and she knew the end was coming. The morning of May 19th, 1536 was still and heavy. The sky above the Tower of London was gray, the air cold and thick with silence. Anne Boleyn had not slept for 17 days. She had been locked in the Queen's lodgings, haunted by rumors, abandoned by allies, and left to prepare for a death she didn't deserve. Now it was time. At dawn, she stepped out of the tower. Her appearance was calm, almost regal. She wore a dark gray gown with a red underskirt, red the color of martyrdom. Her cloak was trimmed with ermine, a symbol of royalty. Every part of her dress seemed chosen not to plead for pity, but to make a final statement. She walked across the grass of Tower Green. No horses, no royal escort, just a small group of guards and a few chosen witnesses. She moved slowly, steady, as if walking through water. Waiting at the scaffold was something unusual. No axe, no clumsy block, but a man from France brought in by special request of the king. He had no hood, no axe, only a sword, a clean, swift blade. This, they claimed, was a gesture of mercy. But was it mercy, or was it theater, unlike the English method, where a dull axe often took several strikes to finish the job? This swordsman was trained to end it in one perfect swing. Henry VIII had ordered him days before Anne was. Even tried. That alone raises questions. As Anne climbed the scaffold, she looked out toward the silent crowd. Nobles, ladies, courtiers. Many had once called her queen none. Spoke. Anne knelt before the block, but not before speaking. Her final words were recorded by a man named John Stowe. She said, "Masters, I here humbly submit me to the law. I die a faithful servant to the king and God." No bitterness, no blame, only a strange calm. Either she had made peace with her fate, or she wanted to deny. The court, the satisfaction of fear, the swordsman stepped forward quietly. In his hand, a long curved blade, razor sharp and polished. He moved with expert grace, distracting her with soft words. He signaled to his assistant to create a diversion. Anne looked toward the sound, and in that second, it was over. One silent, perfect stroke. Her head fell cleanly from her body. No screams, no chaos, just a final breath in silence. Ladies rushed forward, lifting her body and her head. They wrapped her in a cloth and placed her remains in an old arrow chest, a wooden box found in the Tower stores. There was no coffin, no grand procession, no royal funeral. Spot where she died wasn't even marked for centuries. And yet this was a queen of England, the first English queen to be executed, the mother of a future monarch, and she was buried quietly as if the whole thing had never happened. Henry VIII planned Anne's end with chilling precision. He insisted her execution be clean. No public gawking, no mob spectacle. He didn't want fire, as was common for female traitors. Instead, he ordered a silent blade, a quick stroke, all carried out inside the Tower grounds, invisible to the public eye. Anne was the only English queen to be beheaded with a sword, a French method considered more dignified. It was a conscious choice by Henry, designed to show control, grace, and silence. The man behind the blade was a specialist flown in just for her death. No bungled acts, no spectacle. The whole act was staged as a calm royal vanishing. Even her vendor of shame, the courts, the crowd. The rumor mongers were kept at bay. Margaret Pole, by contrast, offers a stark illustration of tyranny's cruelty. a noblewoman of the Plantagenet line and godmother to princes. Mary, she was seen as inconvenient. Her execution in May 1541 was nothing like Anne's orchestrated silence. The usual executioner was absent. In his place came a poorly trained youth wielding an axe disastrously. The first strike missed her neck, cutting her shoulder. It took 11 blows for her head to fall. Witnesses called it a pitiful spectacle, leaving her body hacked and mangled for all to see. That grotesque execution was allowed to be recorded because Margaret Pole had no political value to erase. But Anne's execution, no vivid reports, no horror stories. Historians and chroniclers were directed to preserve calm. The king's men omitted any trauma. Henry wanted her removal to be silent history, not cautionary tale. After death, Anne's body was treated with equal care for appearances. Her remains were buried in the chapel of St. Peter at Vincula within the tower, but her grave was not marked, no monument, no name, just a plain wooden chest. The location was unrecorded. Even her skeleton lay forgotten till Victorian era. Renovations in 1876 uncovered it, and only then was it identified and reburied with ceremony almost 350 years later. No pity, no tomb, no eulogy. That anonymity served the crown's desire. Erase her final moments, remove the body, silence the memory century. After century, nothing pointed exacts. Place of her final walk, only a small square of granite placed during Queen Victoria's reign to mark Tower Green. Yet modern historians question its accuracy. Records suggest the real scaffold stood between the White Tower and the Waterloo Barracks, not where the plaque lies today. That memorial may rest on misinformed grounds based on Victorian guesswork rather than Tudor maps. That empty spot tells its own story. A woman erased from record, a place remembered wrongly. Henry's plan control. The narrative controlled the image work so well that even later generations misplace the very stone where she fell. Meanwhile, Margaret Pole's body rests in a marked grave. Her memorial stands near Anne's in the same chapel, but with her fate spelled out. Her crime questioned, her very existence documented. It almost feels intentional. Anne's death was to vanish into silence. Margaret's death remained loud, messy, indelible, and largely uncontested. Anne's final chapter is buried in that silence. A dignified death delivered with theatrical precision by design. No screaming crowd, no retribution, no scandal, but also no closure. No voice, no body to mourn, no history to record her fear. Instead, a clean story, a polished narrative, and a monarchy unblemished by chaos. This was Henry's legacy. Absolute power over life, death, and memory. And for Anne Boleyn, the ultimate punishment was not the sword, but the silence that followed. She was a queen. She was misjudged. She was manipulated. And when they were done with her, they didn't just end her life. They tried to erase her from memory. Anne Boleyn's fall wasn't just personal. It changed England forever. Her death reshaped how the monarchy worked. It sent a message no one, not even a crown queen, was safe from power's cold grip. But after the blade fell, something strange happened. Silence, no grand funeral, no final tribute. They buried her in an old wooden chest under the stones of the Tower Chapel. No name, no sign, no trace. They removed her and then cleaned the story as if Shed never existed at all. And yet her words remained. Her final speech was calm, graceful, loyal even to the king who had destroyed her. She stood strong even in death. That moment, her poise, her control, left a lasting mark. And Boleyn was many things: queen, prisoner, scapegoat. But she was also the mother of Elizabeth, the first one of the greatest monarchs in English history today. She's seen not just as a victim, but as a symbol, a woman who stood tall in a world built to bring her down. They slashed her body, and they nearly erased her story. But this why we remember. Thank you for watching History Screen, where the stories history tried to hide come back to life. If you found this powerful, subscribe and join us as we uncover the truth behind the past.